of the Marathon County Public Safety Committee to order. And the first thing on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have Supervisor Lamont and Supervisor Opel on WebEx today with us. If you haven't silenced your phones and devices, please do. And I'd like to welcome everybody that's in the gallery today. Thank you all for coming and showing interest in our committee. Is there anyone who has public comment? Okay, thank you. Number 4, approval of the May 9th, 2023 Public Safety Committee minutes. Supervisor Marash, Supervisor Willem, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
And if you are okay with it, we would like to go to number 7 for the convenience of people that are here giving the CART presentation, if that's okay. Okay? All right, number 7, educational presentations and committee discussion. 7A, presentation by Marathon County Crisis Assessment Team, or CART, on their program. And we'll have Lieutenant Nathan Seiler from the Wausau PD kick it off for us.
All right. I'm Nathan Seiler, Lieutenant with Wausau Police Department. I'm with the Investigations Bureau, but within that, we also have school resource officers and the Crisis Assessment Response Team, which is a joint program between the Sheriff's Office, Wausau Police Department, and North Central Healthcare. Just for some context, at the end, I'm going to give you updated statistics of kind of where we're at today compared to when we started in 2018. But for those who don't have that context, I think it's important just to flow through that. So just as a visual, this is kind of what our CART team looks like out in the field. This is an older picture. We have had it since Scott Peterson all the way on to your right when you're looking at that is now Eric Lemerand. And then we have Chuck Christel and Stacy Roselle, our crisis professionals, and then Deputy Jackie White there. But our team, as you can see, is plainclothes staff, non-uniform, although the officers do carry the regular things along with them. And those are the 2 squads they have, which are unmarked squads. So part of when this started in 2018, the Sheriff's Office, this was something started by then Chief Deputy Chad Billup, and going through what he had to do to get some funding for the squad. So we're thankful for that. That was through some kind donations from Greenheck Foundation to help out with that initial resource. So this kind of started with crisis process improvement back in 2014 when there were some statute changes. I remember when I was on patrol, night shift, Wausau PD, I started in 2005. And our old approach was really cut and dry, pretty simple. And I'm just remembering how naive I think we were back then. It was, you go to a call, somebody expressed some suicidal ideation or a concern, and it was, all right, you're coming with me, and I take you to the healthcare center, I drop you off, and that was about it. And we weren't too involved in what was going on in their crisis at the moment. But that resulted in a lot more people just going into custody, and we've learned since then. So as a result of that statutory reform, part of that was detentions need to be the least restrictive alternative appropriate to the person's needs. So that became the focus for crisis process improvement, is just treating people in the least restrictive way based on what's going on with them. So that's taking a little more time to speak with them, de-escalate, build rapport, problem solve, and safety plan with them instead of just taking them into custody at their home or in front of their family and the trauma that comes with that. So through crisis process improvement, that through the Sheriff's Office and North Central Healthcare, also talking with like our medical providers like Aspirus, talked about a number of things we could do to improve system-wide. So first was crisis intervention team training. I remember that. Again, I think Sheriff Chad Billup, I remember being behind that. And I remember going to that CIT training back then as a Wausau PD officer and really just trying to get everybody in the county, whoever's available, to get that initial training. That started back in 2016. So for those 2-3 years, I was trying to get as many officers and deputies and local law enforcement through that. Since then, it's offered annually around the state. I know it's hosted here at NTC quite often, and we try to get all our new officers into that as soon as possible. So along with that, CART was one of those initiatives to help this process. January 1st, 2018 is kind of when that went into play. And also on here, I just noted, it was around the same time Wausau PD, we had a couple of our school resource officers begin with their therapy dogs as another component to addressing crisis differently. So crisis intervention team training, regardless if it's a CART officer or any law enforcement officer, just being able to be equipped with the tools and skills necessary to de-escalate and build trust with that client or that person out in the community, not only in the best interest of the client and getting the help they need and feel like we're listening and understanding the situation, but also just reducing those use of force incidents, reducing the frequency at which we got to put somebody in handcuffs and everything that comes with that, which also has a financial component or financial cost to that as well. So for CART, each of these agencies added positions. Wausau PD added one law enforcement officer, as did the Sheriff's Office, and then 2 crisis professionals from North Central Healthcare, funded by each agency. So, and those 4 individuals are that's their full-time assignment for joint response and prevention, plainclothes and those unmarked vehicles that you saw. So that officer and that deputy have office space at Wausau PD as well as some space here at the Sheriff's Office. And those crisis professionals also have office space at those locations where they can satellite out of there and work together and communicate. They also have, CCIT has all the tools and things necessary set up for them at those locations so they can use their computer and access their records and such. So our goals and objectives kind of evolved a little bit over time. When we first started this, it was new. We didn't really have a clear path. It was trying out some things and see what worked. But we started with kind of our goal, which was reducing the occurrence of individuals in Marathon County being taken into custody under emergency detention. And at the same time, improving the outcomes of those police interactions with the individuals living with mental illness. So taking them into custody does not typically involve a positive police interaction. So within that goal, we named a few objectives. So first is the reactive objective, responding to mental health related calls in the community to address that immediate crisis. So CART, that team, just because they have more repetitions and more training and just more day-to-day experience, they're going to be the best at doing that de-escalation, determining what the mental health issue is, problem solving, finding commitment alternatives instead of having to take them into custody, finding ways that we can stabilize them. So when we do that right, we reduce the cycle, right? We reduce the recidivism by impacting the likelihood that that person's going to go to crisis in the future. So we're trying to keep them in the community, keep them in their home instead of cycling them through the crisis center and everything that comes with that. So that means taking the time to build that positive relationship with those clients and people in the community, building trust with them, offering support, and being able to circle back and let them know that we're going to connect with them again. That's where number 2 comes in, initiating those proactive contacts in the community. Between the healthcare center and our officers, they know who a lot of our frequent utilizers are of that system, and trying to get them connected with whatever resources they need, and doing some of that outreach after the fact, after the crisis, to try to find out how we can stop that cycle so they're not a call on the next shift and the next officer and taking them out of their home again. So number 3, seeking creative solutions for frequent utilizers. There's so many examples for this between the Sheriff's Office and us that our officers and staff can speak about. There's so many people in our community that they're not necessarily meeting the qualifications of immediate dangerousness that we're going to commit them. But nonetheless, there might be some paranoid delusional disorders, things like that going on where they're displaying some behavior in the community that draws attention. People don't like that. They don't, they see something odd, that's odd behavior, and they want someone to deal with it. They're not sure if this person's in crisis or what's going on, but example of someone calling because they're, the people that are going in and out of the house through the walls or crawling through the air ducts, things like that, they don't really qualify for for us to take him into custody, but the neighbor is sick and tired of this person running around his house and causing a ruckus and becomes a nuisance for the neighbors. And so someone is still looking for police to address that somehow. Whose problem is that to solve? So CART is a way that we can address those individuals and build relationships with them. Even though we can't take them to the healthcare center that day against their will, there's somebody that they can call and connect with directly instead of making that 911 call to dispatch 5 times in that day. So CART is kind of that liaison with those individuals in our community, keep tabs on them a little bit, try to minimize the frequency at which those behaviors are out in the community or that they're standing out in the middle of the street blocking traffic, things like that. So a lot of time is spent on number 3 here. Fourth and final, building those positive relationships with partner service providers, including medical, mental health, and a lot of our consumer support organizations. Aspirus, Ministry, North Central Healthcare, obviously. Social Services, our new Community Partners Campus, Salvation Army, Catholic Charities. There's a lot of overlap in there. We encounter and support a lot of the same people across substance abuse, mental health. There's a lot of overlap with that, and also with homelessness. I think I hit on these already. Of our 4 CART team members, short-term problem solving, pending long-term services, that proactive follow-up for safety planning. So when that person was in the crisis center earlier in the week, they do get released, that there's somebody who can follow up with them and be there for them and be a support system for them to hopefully prevent that cycle or future crisis. They're also that resource liaison for the rest of our officers and deputies in the field, working through difficult problems, difficult cases. They're just another resource for our staff to lean on and consult with. So those complex cases, that's kind of what I talked about already. When our community expects and calls and expects us to address a person in their community, sometimes they don't understand that this isn't a situation where you can take that person's rights away, even though it'd be convenient for them at the time if police did take this person away. So CART is a good resource, and they know who these individuals are and can provide that context to people and our citizens to help them understand, help our businesses understand what we can and can't do with certain individuals, while at the same time trying to help build that relationship with them to get them the treatment and help they deserve. Just sometimes it's a marathon trying to convince somebody that what's happening to them, what they're seeing is not reality, and we can get you help. And sometimes it takes a long time to convince them to follow along with us and go get that help they need from a provider. Some of the sources of CART team response, obviously calls received through dispatch, through the 911 communication center, sometimes received directly from the crisis center, people that call into the crisis center and they refer crisis professionals there are asking officers to respond and check on somebody. Other law enforcement agencies, our community welfare agencies, when some of those clients are at their places and are in crisis, obviously from family members, friends wanting us to check welfare on their loved ones. Something we've struggled with as we get in closer to statistics here is trying to figure out the question of how many mental health calls do we go to in Marathon County. And I thought that was an easy answer when I started this. And as I started diving into it, I found out how difficult that is to put into context. It's kind of an enigma because calls for service, there's many different types of calls for service that dispatch enters into the CAD system, if you're familiar with that. So mental health or mental subject is just one of many different call types that pops up there. But the only time that that's really used, it is used frequently, but it's when there's nothing else going on. When someone calls in someone who looks like they're having a mental health crisis, but it's not a medical emergency necessarily. It's not a crime that's occurring. It's not domestic violence. And so dispatch will attach that type of call to it. But as we know, law enforcement gets called on a daily basis to all different types of calls because people are having a bad day. And a lot of that stems from mental health. So mental health is intertwined in so many different types of calls. The second category that is so frequently involving mental health is welfare check. Juvenile disturbances, juvenile attempt to locate, which is like a juvenile runaway. Juvenile disturbance, a lot of times it might be behavioral, but we don't really know until we get there. It might be from a home in the summer or sometimes at school. Domestic violence, threat with a weapon, traffic incidents. Somebody's, they're coping by using alcohol medication because they're in crisis. They're out in their car and now we're responding to a traffic crash. Medical emergencies, drug overdoses. So initial information is it's a medical emergency. Officers get there. They may not know why the person is incapacitated by drugs or alcohol at the time. They don't know why the person they did that until they could be cleared from the hospital the next day and start talking about why they did what they did. But any one of those categories can result in an emergency detention. So we use the mental health category and the welfare check category as kind of a litmus test, kind of a place to go to as a marker, I guess, for what our calls for service are looking like around mental health. So I think I described this already. Mental health and welfare check is probably our most common areas for call types that involve mental health and emergency detentions. But as an example for Wausau PD, just looking at the last 4 years, 2019 to 2022, here's a list of other of emergency detentions that occurred, and when looking back at what the call types were. So over that 4-year period, these other call types accounted for 18% of the emergency detentions that Wausau PD interacted with. So you had 61 medical emergencies, 23 that were coded as crimes. So it might have been, could be a drug offense. Somebody is arrested for drugs, but after they're arrested, they might talk about why they're drug addicted right now. So that spins down into crisis, and now we're doing a 5115. But a lot of times these criminal events are being done because people are desperate, right? So after they commit their crime, they're caught, they talk about what's going on in their life. And now we have a 5115 potentially. Family disturbance, so domestics, talked about traffic incidents sometimes. So it's not always lying within the mental health call type. So kind of looking at our statistics updated through end of 2022, 2023, just kind of used the calls for service monthly average from January through end of May, so the first 5 months of this year. But we kind of been using this as a gauge to when people ask us how many mental health calls for service or what does that trend look like, these are the two categories we point to, welfare check and mental health, as kind of the test of what the trend is looking like. So in 2017, during that crisis process improvement, before CART, we were looking at, 914 is kind of where we're at from the CAD source there on mental health calls for service. That's Wausau PD and the Sheriff's Office combined. So that's just the Sheriff's Office jurisdiction. That does not include, the Edgar, Stratford, other places that have their own police agency. We're just going to take the top two here. But so you can see where that trend is, and that, again, that is on the mental health call for service, just that call type. And what we saw during COVID, 2019 and 2020, we saw call for services across the board go down a little bit just by the nature of law enforcement not taking certain types of calls, not responding to everything, but also just people not out in the community and not as much happening out in the community. But then as you saw after 2020, then we kind of had that spike once people are coming back out again. Also in there, school was out for a chunk of that time. And then 2022, it's kind of leveling off. So far 2023, we've got a lot of calls, and on pace, we would be continuing up this year. Welfare check, kind of that same trend line. It's just been increasing quite a bit over the last 5-6 years. But what we would like to see, and what we're hopeful when we started this program, is reducing that frequency of emergency detentions. I think that was a focal point in starting this program. I don't have the numbers on this, what the cost, what it was per person who is committed and hospitalized to the county who pays for that. But I know that could be pretty substantial cost for every person that we hospitalize. So even though those numbers are going up, our emergency detentions have continued to trend down. And really that's been the whole goal of CART, is to reduce that frequency at which we take people into custody. So as you can see here, even through 2022, we continue to go down from where we started. So I got Sheriff's Office and Wausau PD kind of separated out here. But right now, 2023, as it's trending right now, we're hopefully going to end up with a record low and continue to go down. I'll say in the spring and the winter time, we typically have more. In the summertime, it kind of tapers off. It's just it can be a seasonal thing. But to put that into further context about kind of the percentage increase of the calls for service compared to emergency detentions, if you look at just through 2022, our mental health and welfare check calls for service have gone up since 2017, have gone up 41% in mental health calls for service in that category and 23% increase in the welfare check category. And for 2023, you can kind of see what the projections are there. Right now, we're looking at a hefty increase if it stays where it is for the rest of the year. Versus our emergency detentions have continued to go down. Since 2017, by the end of 2022, we're 33% down on emergency detentions. So that's what we're hoping for. We want to continue to see that. We hope that our calls for service level off or go down. But we think that a combination of the CIT training, have our officers, all of our officers, not just the CART team, but have everybody with that training and experience helps drive down that final number. It's not just that 4-person team, obviously, but working together and being that liaison for the rest of the deputies, that's where CART also can be of impact and help them work through these so that we're not taking as many people into custody. So hopefully 2023, we continue on this trend, and if it stays at the current monthly average, it would be down a 46% decrease from where we started in 2017. So those numbers you look at, we had 914 mental health calls for service in 2017, 2,030 welfare checks, and out of those we had 270 emergency detentions, although some came from other categories, but that is our total. So the emergency detentions, that's something that Corporation Counsel keeps track for us. So they're the final say on what those numbers are. And then I just wanted to touch, almost finished here, I wanted to touch on juveniles because they are kind of separate because juvenile in crisis sometimes will more often come in on that juvenile disturbance or juvenile ATL call for service. It doesn't always go into that mental health category. But we just learned how dramatic that can be for juveniles in that process in the old approach, being detained by a police officer, transported in a squad car, sometimes in restraints. Juveniles always had to go for medical clearance and the time that took, and then transporting all the way out to Winnebago, and what that involved for a child and how traumatic that could be, and really, how is that going to help them get better or get to school the next day and be back with their family. It wasn't working out so well. So in that crisis process improvement during that 2016 to 2019, there's a number of initiatives that community-wide that kind of went into effect. Counseling consortium between the school districts and getting more mental health therapists in the schools, the CIT training we spoke of here, adverse childhood experience training for law enforcement and school staff, therapy dogs in schools just as another way to de-escalate kids and keep them in school instead of taking them out of school. Within the Wausau district in 2016 to 2017, we went from, in the 2 high schools, we went from 12 in custody detentions down to 0 in 2 years just by putting some of these things into place and handling it differently. So ultimately, we want that reduction in juvenile crisis and detentions. With some of those programs, it seems like those have been helpful because over that same time period, 2017 to 2022, we have seen that level off and even go down in terms of the number of juvenile disturbances and juveniles in crisis. We still have, it's not going down enough. There's still a lot of that goes on, but with more training across law enforcement and schools, we're just able to keep kids in school more. We're able to handle those there in school or with the mental health therapist instead of law enforcement always having to get involved so that we can drive down the number of calls that we're getting in that respect. So that's all I have. I have some representatives from the Healthcare Center that we invite along too, just to be able to provide further context and their perspective on anything, but questions certainly welcome.
Any questions from the committee? Supervisor Marash.
So there was a task force with Wausau Police Department, and it was found that expanding CART would be beneficial. So what does that look like in your opinion?
Sure. We've had lots of discussions across the team and the supervisor team and the healthcare center and our agencies. Law enforcement, we have minimum staffing. We're always going to have at least a minimum number of staff on the road. We have, our 2 crisis professionals that are working during the day, but they're still just 2 people. They can't work 7 days a week. We still have vacation time, leave time, sick time, things like that, as do our 2 officers. Whereas the crisis center, they still have a crisis center to staff and manage down there. And we can't do our jobs effectively if we don't have staff down there. And that's priorities to keep them staffed. And so when they're down in the crisis center, our CART team, crisis professionals, will have to go down there and help out. And that's necessary. And we totally agree that has to happen in order to cover the phone lines and take those initial calls. We can still work things remotely if we really need to. But ultimately, additional crisis professionals would be great. We talked about adding, if we can staff it, additional crisis professionals to satellite out of either the sheriff's office or Wausau PD, just to be more readily available to be able to go out on calls with officers. It doesn't have to be with a CART officer, but to be able to cover that afternoon night shift and be able to be that consult and direct tie to the healthcare center. But it seems like you have more people that get more trained and more repetitions in this. I mean, I assert that, what we're seeing here in terms of driving down the emergency detentions, that we're going the right direction, and more people would certainly help. I'll let anyone back there from the crisis center give your perspective on that. Like how, the crisis center, North Central Healthcare, any, thoughts on just further personnel resources to CART and what that looks like and challenges and future.
No problem.
So I can comment on that. As we're looking at our overall staffing and overall programs, we actually just had a great presentation on our crisis services period for our North Central Healthcare Program Board. And in that presentation, the unfortunate statistic we have right now with our staffing is that we have 40% vacancies in our crisis staff. So we really are at a point where we have, that is our priority, is to get those positions filled before we can look at any expansion. We would love to see an increase in mobile crisis response period, in addition to CART. I mean, CART's like one program like that. There are other ways to do mobile crisis that we've been able to do in the past and are not able to do that now. So definitely multiple requests for us to expand crisis, but we have to get our foundation stable before we can do that. And you alluded to the fact law enforcement sometimes at minimal staffing too. So if we look at the CART piece, that has to be both of our agencies respectively can be at the point of doing that.
Thank you, Vicki. Did you have something, Chair Gibbs?
I did. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for a great presentation. One of the questions that I had was 988 going online. Has the demand and the increased request for services increased significantly?
988 is the new crisis line. Is that demand for police services? I guess I just, our call for service numbers have continued to go up, I guess. I would say like in 2023, it still looks like it's trending upward. I'm not sure if the crisis center, like as far as call volume down there, what that looks like.
I am Chuck Christel. I'm one of the CART members. As far as 988, it's great. And actually, I've worked with 988 on some of the high priority where they had done welfare checks. One of the barriers that I see with 988 is they don't collect demographic information. So you may know a location where the person is, but they can make up a fictitious name. They don't get a date of birth. So as far as the crisis center, it's hard to kind of track all of that because they can give a really, really bad, they make up fake names. So I worked with a welfare check, and it took me 2.5 hours to try to narrow down who this person was. And it still wasn't substantiated on if this person had actually called. So I can't say that calls have trended up since 988. I know we utilize 988 for frequent callers that what I would classify as a warm call, right? Someone who is just struggling, being lonely, doesn't have any self-harming thoughts or anything like that. That's a great resource for that population. So that there's a double-edged sword in regards to the 988 system. Because of the hot calls, the people that are suicidal, that give fake names, they don't collect date of birth, they don't collect demographics, right? So that's the barrier that I see as a clinician.
Oh, that reminded me of some additional context that we talked about when CART started. 998 would be another example. When we see calls for service go up, and we saw that dramatic increase early on, there was a huge focus by the healthcare center to really promote their services, and we promoted CART, and here's what's available. There's a big push to our community. Look, if you need help, don't be afraid. We're trying to destigmatize this call. And that really drove a lot of, so we saw that that's a good thing. People are asking, looking for help, wanting to take advantage of the resources. So you put a resource out there like that, yeah, we should expect things to go up. So I don't want to say that, it's really bad, our numbers are going up. You can look at it as, that's a good thing. It means we're providing more services. The healthcare center is providing services that people want and are, taking advantage of those. So it's not a bad thing. And we've done some in the last couple of years. We have 4 people on the CART team, and now that we've gotten rolling a little bit, early on, before we really knew what we're trying to get at and how this was going to work and trying to feel out partnerships, it was really, you had kind of 2 units that were out there, 2 pairs and just responding that way, where now that with more experience and more time, we're really finding we can do a lot and accomplish more with a little bit of divide and conquer. We get 4 capable people on that team, experienced crisis professionals. They can handle a lot and divide and conquer, where an officer can still go help other officers on a call, be that CIT expert. Meanwhile, a crisis professional might have paperwork or notes from the prior thing they're doing. They may have a follow-up phone call to check in on people that they safety plan the prior days. So I think as a team, our team members are getting more and more efficient over time as we figure that out. So the crisis professionals on the CART team, we try to, obviously, we probably cherry picked a little bit, and we got probably the best ones down there. But yeah, we look forward to, when we get more of those, because our officers love working with the crisis professionals, loving having that extra resource at their fingertips and a direct contact, and that can help, run interference while they're dealing with the individual. So our officers and our staff would love to see us up that staff, for sure.
Does anyone else have a question? Jason?
So what do you do when because you said the CART officers only work during the day. So in the evenings and at night, how do you address the same situations when you don't have the members that you have during the day?
Sure.
So you don't have, you get similar results.
Right. So, that's part of the CIT training across the board, right? So that we try to get all of our officers at least the base level of skill, and kind of that, looking at it through a new lens. That's what CIT kind of does, is get them to look at people a little bit differently about, not what's wrong with you, but, what happened to you, that kind of thing. And being able to help our officers understand, you spend more time with them, less use of force, less having to maybe deal with this person repeatedly over the course of the week. So that's helped. But they're going to the calls as usual. If it's a 2-officer call, a lot of these they're calling the crisis center directly, and they're going to talk to whoever's staffed on the crisis center, who are essentially a similar role as the crisis professionals. They're just not there in the moment with them, which could be more advantageous. But so we make do by kind of a hybrid of the old way. We're still responding just like we always do. We have to go. We're treating people in a different way with a different focus, but we're still relying on the healthcare center making that phone call. And a lot of times it's over the phone. It might be an over the phone assessment, or they're convincing that person to come voluntarily down to the crisis center so they can speak to a crisis professional to have an assessment done. So right now, we ran some statistics over the last couple of years on when calls are coming in. We saw calls for service, but looking at dates and days of the week and times, and it's still the heat map shows it's still during that daytime. That's when people are up. That's when they're awake, they're out moving, out and about. That's when community organizations and services and things like that are open and available. So we're still seeing the highest activity sort of between that 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. timeframe. Not by much, but it's still higher than our night shift.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? No more questions? You want more? Okay.
With the staffing issues you're talking about, are you making progress on filling them? Because I know somebody that works in Lincoln County, and when they need somebody to come up, they've been having issues getting staff from North Central Healthcare to come up to assess people that might be suicidal. And it was a big complaint, and I've been hearing about it, so that's what I'd ask.
Yes, we have one crisis professional that is assigned to Lincoln and Langley County. So only one person that geographically is the primary person to move around. So that's a big area for one person. So that's understandable. There'd be concerns there. That's one of the things that we want to address. In terms of making progress, I think we are making progress overall with our vacancies at North Central Healthcare. We've had our largest orientation sessions have been in the last few months with new employees, so that's really great. Crisis is, we're getting some new people, but probably not percentage-wise as much. It's a really hard job. So again, give these guys credit for their dedication to their profession. It's a really hard job. We do have some new people that have started recently, so that's great. Our HR department is wonderful, working with our marketing department in terms of advertising differently and trying to explain the job in a different way as well as the benefits for it. So we're starting to see some progress, and we'll hope that continues, and looking word of mouth for anybody who wants to refer people to work with us, because it is a great place to work, and these people making an amazing difference. So we are seeing progress is the short answer.
Anything else?
If I can,
You
Madam
can.
Chair. Thank you. Just to add one additional piece of context, and Nate brought this up in terms of the data that he shared, which was really, I think, is a good visual. When you think about the context for how CART along with CIT started, you've probably heard this acronym before, but our CJCC, Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, you think that a predecessor of that was EBDM, we love acronyms, evidence-based decision-making. And at the same time, when you think back 2016, 2017, the county, working with all of our partners, looked at, hey, we have a similar pressure within the jail. Our jail population around that time in 2017, I'm looking at the budget, was average monthly census was 401.75. And trying to make sure we have, as Nate referenced on the mental health side, the right intervention. We want to make sure we had the right people in the jail. So CIT training, crisis intervention training, CART, and a number of other initiatives were discussed at our evidence-based decision-making group. And again, I think you see that collectively they have made a difference, not only on the emergency detention side, but I think CART is one of the it's a small part, similar to CIT. All these small initiatives that the county and the sheriff's office has led over the last several years, collectively, they make a big difference. It's all the things that Nate referenced with schools. It's when you talk about the county and social services moving into working with schools to address adverse childhood experiences, really diving in. What does that mean? And it's how you interact with people. Like Nate said, moving away from what's wrong with you to, hey, what happened? What happened to you? And you're more open to finding a solution as opposed to dealing with the problem, which was the person in our previous view. Similarly, the health department with the consortium. The school-based mental health consortium was, again, a county-led initiative. All those things collectively together have made an impact. Now, how much for each of those is difficult to say, but I think, as Vicki said, making sure we're committed to our core staffing, I think, is one thing we need to make sure we keep an eye on. If anyone wants some really interesting, riveting read, just today, the Wisconsin Policy Forum released an overall government staffing report looking at vacancy rates over the last several years within the state of Wisconsin. They'd previously released one for local governments. It really points to a very challenging environment, to your question, Supervisor, about the ability to fill vacancy in some core areas. In the state, it's nursing homes, psychiatric hospitals, and corrections. Well, what does the county deliver in partnership with directly or in partnership with North Central Healthcare? Corrections, nursing home, psychiatric hospital. So we got challenges ahead of us, but I think we are, as Vicki said, I think we're doing some innovative things and trying to create the right culture to get the right people, like Chuck and Stacy, and get the right people to come partner with law enforcement. We're in a better situation than a lot of other places, but credit to Nate and the leadership of the PD and the Sheriff's Office and North Central.
Thank you. Anything else? Vicki?
I just want to make one more comment. When you had the slide up there about the juvenile EDs going down over time, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, of course, I think that a factor of that is our youth hospital and youth crisis stabilization facility, which are new in the last several years since that data is collected, so that we're able to earlier intervene with kids in our crisis stabilization facility, as well as when they do have to be hospitalized. They can stay locally for the most part, and that is a better result for them. So again, another good thing we have in our community.
Thank you. Okay, Stacy.
Thank you. Since you brought that up, how is the staffing for those two departments you just mentioned?
They're relatively stable. The overnight shift is the worst for any type of hospital setting to fill, as you can imagine, and nursing homes. So we're struggling in some areas with that, the overnight shift. So we're being really creative on how we can get people to be interested in taking those shifts, even temporarily, and being able to change up the hours instead of 12-hour shifts as an 8-hour shift or a 6-hour shift. So we're looking at lots of different things. There was a period of time where our youth stabilization facility did not have overnight staff last year and into the beginning of this year. And so it was open as a day treatment only, which actually was quite well received by partners. It was actually quite well used, although they still want to, of course, have the whole 24-hour experience for the youth. And so we've had that open fully since March, I believe it is.
Anything else? Thank you, Nathan. That was really great. I think our CART program has really been an asset to the county. Appreciate all of your hard work. Okay, moving on to number 5, policy issues, discussion, and potential committee determination. A, discussion regarding 2024 annual budget and policy recommendations from the committee. We list all 3 of these together. Number 1, mandatory and discretionary program document. 2, use of rates and fees. 3, understanding the department's use of levy. And I know we covered this last month. Does anyone have any additions or questions? Anybody on WebEx? Oh, that was easy.
No.
Oh, Supervisor Lamont, you said no? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and moving on then to, sorry, I'm sorry.
No, I do have questions about many of these things, since we have 3 mandatory discretionary programs, the rates and fees, and understanding the department's use of levy. So in going through everything, so on our packet, I believe it's page 8 with the public safety aspect of it, district attorney stuff, the diversion activities. Since we're supposed to be going through all of this for budget reasons, the diversion activities show that they're not mandated. So I was just curious, which specific diversion activities do we have, and how much they cost?
We have representatives from the DA's office that can talk to you about diversion. I'll talk to you a little bit about cost, and I've given the same spiel to every standing committee about it. It's a great, yeah, I have no doubt you have. It's a great question. our budgeting process, and if you want an equally riveting read to the Wisconsin Policy Forum document, you can look to your Wisconsin Counties Supervisor Handbook. I think it's the 8th edition is the recent one. Every supervisor gets it from the Counties Association. It talks about the different types of budgeting that's done in counties. Counties use line item budgeting. So our budget within the DA's office has personnel broken out. Very rarely within departments do we have we have costs that we can align very clearly to all of our programs that are separate. We have a lot of, for lack of a better term, overhead. We don't allocate. Here's a really mundane example. We have a paper budget, paper and supplies, but we don't say how much paper did Ruth use in diversion and how much postage did she use and how much office space do they have and what's the facility cost. We don't do that. The way that counties budget in the state of Wisconsin is line item budgeting. If you think it's about page 135 in that handbook, it tells you the different types of budgeting. So to your specific question about what does it cost for diversion, we can get you a number. I'm not sure we can get you a number quickly, but it's going to be, I'll be very honest and upfront. It is going to be an estimate using analytical assumptions or algorithm assumptions to allocate costs, like I just said about paper. We had an initiative a number of years ago that was seeking to get us more in line with having the opportunity to derive those costs, but I wouldn't be confident in giving you those numbers that they're going to be of meaningful value. So the cost part is difficult. They can talk to you about the programs and kind of what they look like and what the value that's derived. It's very similar to CART, right? What's the value between CART and CIT? It's the reduction in these cases going through the criminal justice system. It's keeping more from going into the funnel. Now there's some diversion that actually still go through the funnel, and you guys can talk about all that fun stuff, but that's my boring, mundane start and kickoff to the question.
We can always do a more robust presentation at a later time if you want, but just to try to be as concise and simple as possible. So we pay for 2 diversion positions in the district attorney's office. My position is the diversion supervisor. My name is Ruth Heinzel. And then Nikki's position, she's the diversion specialist. We also have a couple contracted positions for case management services. So we deal with approximately diverting around 500 people per year from the criminal justice system. So that's where the cost savings comes in, is reduction in recidivism and reduction in court time, prosecutor time. So that's where the cost savings part. So we have a post-charge diversion program and a pre-charge diversion program. They're very broad categories, so any case can be diversion. For the most part, they're first-time offenders. And again, we can go more into detail on that at a later time if you're interested. And if you have any questions today, I can answer that too. So for that diversion light item, that mostly counts towards my position and Nikki's position. We also do have diversion programs that we support, like the deflection program with law enforcement. And we have treatment courts and a lot of those activities as well. Does that answer your question for the most part? I'll have Kyle answer some more.
My name's Kyle Mayo. I'm one of the assistant DAs here in Marathon County. And just going off of that, as Ruth said, there's 2 kind of main categories of our diversion. One is a pre-charge. So that's where someone is referred for criminal charges from law enforcement. So they're either referred for disorderly conduct or possession of THC, criminal damage to property, misdemeanor theft, something like that, before they're charged in court. So before we file a criminal complaint, they'll go through Ruth's diversion program. They do assessments on them, see what type of needs they need. And one of the general rules is stay out of trouble, so you can't get any new referrals, and then complete all the requirements, the programming they asked for. If you do all that, stay out of trouble, that case will never be filed in court. So it'll never get a CCAP case number. It won't have the prosecutor time, defense time, judge's time, court time. And that's important because it's not on CCAP then. So future employers can't go on and look at that. It's really nowhere in the public for them to see. So it keeps them out of that realm in order to allow them the future. And recidivism, Ruth has numbers on that as well. We track that to see how well that's doing, and we periodically look at that to see if it's worthwhile. Are we keeping people out of the system? That's the goal of the pre-charge, is don't get them there in the first place, and then make sure they stay out in the future. And then the second type is a post-charge diversion. That's where a criminal case is filed. It goes through the court process, but instead of the person having that conviction, they do a similar programming where it's either alcohol and other drug assessment, anger management, something like that based on assessments that we have them do. And then if they complete that and stay out of trouble, we'll either dismiss that charge, we'll reduce it to an ordinance. A lot of times we'll work with felonies and misdemeanors. So if someone doesn't have a felony record, we'll do where they are deferred on the felony count that they have for, say, 18 months. They'll do probation on a misdemeanor count, and then if they stay out of trouble, do everything they're supposed to, that felony count will get dismissed. So then they don't have that felony on their record, because that's also a big burden going forward, is that felony conviction. So we try and keep that off the record as much as possible. So that's kind of the two separate categories on that.
Do you want to, can you guys tell a little bit of context? You said 500 cases go through diversion. My recollection of the total number of cases within the office that are filed each year, is it like 5,500?
It's less than that now.
Less than that.
But probably closer to 4,000. Yeah.
So if 4,000 cases are filed each year, we have 500 that are being kept out of the traditional criminal justice system. You can see it has a pretty substantial impact on overall workload.
Another one of our big ones that we do is a operating after revocation deferred program. That's a pre-charge diversion program. Those relate to people that have an alcohol-related offense, so an OWI on their record. Their license was revoked. For whatever reason, they didn't get their license back. They didn't do the classes. They didn't get the IID, install the ignition interlock device, install their vehicle, something like that, where now they don't have a license. And when they drive, they can get arrested for the operating after revocation. We have a program through our program in Attic Correctional to help them get their license back. Work with them on what do you need to get your license back, and then work with them to do that and make sure they get their license back. That's the goal of that program, is to get them relicensed, have them have the insurance that they need, and have that license in the future. And that is a lot. There's quite a few of those that also then saves the court time of going through. Those are generally resolutions of fines in the past. So it's going through the court process, everyone's time for the fine, whereas in this case, we're working on getting that license back for them so that they can operate legally on the roads.
And if I can just add one thing to what Kyle talks about, it's, you know, we talk about district attorney time and court time. I think it's also really important to, when you look at the criminal justice system, it's, I'm a big analogy fan. It's like a restaurant. And if you think about all the potential bottlenecks, right? Judges might be your cooks. The DAs might be the wait staff. And you know what? Defense attorneys are your tables. And if anyone is short, you can't move people through. And when we have 400 cases that people sit down and 400, 500 cases, people might sit down and meet with Nikki or Ruth and not necessarily have to go through and feel the obligation to go get a defense attorney. That helps because we have a real, as all of you know from this committee or service on this committee, we have a real shortage of defense attorneys in the state of Wisconsin and also here. So I think that's an important piece. And then the last thing, you know, to give again additional context, one of the things that's in the criminal justice system, it's been my experience, it's important to always remember there are, you know, public safety drives this committee. That's your mission. It drives our criminal justice system, that commitment to public safety. But there's also a really strong component of being mindful of the ancillary consequences that come with criminal court involvement. I mean, the simple act of being arrested, as Nate was talking about with emergency detention, the same thing applies to arrest. There's a lot of data that talks about the impact of arrest on people's future success in life. Certainly being charged, as Kyle referenced. You talk about a conviction for something right now that will, in the state of Wisconsin, result almost certainly in a fine. If you were to be convicted, possession of THC has significant consequences for individuals looking to go into higher education. Rental history, as Kyle referenced, things on CCAP. Despite that warning and advisement on there that says you cannot use this for, as a means to discriminate against individuals for employment or for housing, that information is out there. And to the extent we can assist people in addressing their challenges and their needs in a way that contributes to their future success, or at least doesn't inhibit it, I think has been a real strength of the program, having seen it operate for a great many years.
One other thing I thought of, we do still honor the victim rights. So everything you see with the victim rights that we are required to do, that all is incorporated into the diversion program. So that notice, the input, that's all included in there. And we work with them for the restitution so that they can pay the restitution to the victims and make the victims whole at the end.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions. Let's see. So with the sheriff's office, with the electronic monitoring, I know that now we're using that instead of the Huber law, correct? So I was just curious, how much of a savings are we seeing with that too?
I don't have the exact numbers from today, but on average, we're averaging probably 25 or so people a day are on electronic monitor. Those are folks that if they weren't on monitor, they would be in our facility and we would be paying all those expenses. I'll give you an example. If one of these folks that we put out on monitor has a major medical issue, when they're on the monitor, we're not responsible for those medical costs. If they're in our jail, we are responsible for 100% of those medical costs. And the person that's on the monitor is responsible for paying the costs of the monitoring. So you'll see in our revenues that there's actually a line for electronic monitor fees that we collect, and that comes from the person that's out.
Which brings me to that same question as far as fees. So the diversion fee is $75. So who pays the diversion fee? The person that, sorry, I have a lot of questions. I don't know.
So the diversion fee is paid by the individual that is participating.
Okay.
They have to pay that upfront as part of the process in order to have the diversion.
Okay, so then would this be an area where if we would increase the fees, would that be beneficial at all or not? Is it something to consider? I'm sorry, this is for budgeting. I'm.
And Ruth can speak on it some more. Part of it, the population that we're working with has, a lot of them are public defender eligible for representation. And so there's also the concern of access to the program, where if we raise the fee too high, individuals that aren't able to afford it may not be able to enter the diversion and then would get diverted into the criminal justice system, which would, in the long run, cost more money. So that's one thing to remember when looking at the fee is the ability to pay for individuals and making sure that it's available to the whole population. A lot of the crimes that we're looking at are the lower level crimes where it might be poverty driven. So it's retail thefts that are poverty driven, and then we put on a diversion fee that's higher, they might not be able to afford that.
Okay, just so for full transparency, the average diversion fee throughout the state is around $250. We do $75. However, just to give a warning on that, it costs a lot of staff time to get somebody to pay $75, and it costs a huge delay in court time to make someone pay that up front. So it's hard for people to pay $75 before their plea. If we increase to $250, there will probably be more delayed court processing with that. I would argue we do not get our $75 back in court staff time, or in staff time, that we do when they pay it. So I would love for you to get rid of the fee if you wanted to do that to save staff time. But I would just hesitate against increasing it to the state average. A lot of places that have higher averages also have colleges and whatnot where people are more able to pay higher amounts of money. But we do see a significant amount of people that have a hard time paying that fee. So we just delay it until they can pay it instead of denying them from the program due to ability to pay. So
part of this, we don't have a process after that initial entry into the program to collect that fee. So if we don't collect that fee up front, we don't have, I guess the alternative would be to revoke their agreement if they can't pay it at the end. Again, that doesn't seem very judicial economy, because we're going to then, if they don't fail out of the program, they go back into the criminal justice system. So that's, the court costs and fees associated with the court. They can set up payment plans. The clerk's office has different ways to collect that. We don't have those methods to collect that fee, so we require it up front.
If I can add one thing, I think your question is very, it's very apropos, like Ruth and Kyle are talking about. It's a complex thing. I think evaluating in a meaningful way what if any fee change policy we should have is a great conversation. Not so much, as Ruth said, on the revenue side, but maybe what we find out is, you know what, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on the $75, and Lance can't pay his fee. I'm going to I meet with Ruth, and I have a post-charge is the idea, post-charge deferred. I don't have the money. I show up to a plea in branch 1. Oh, I haven't paid yet. What do? Everyone is there ready to go with a plea, but I haven't paid, so we reschedule it, and that whole 15 or 30-minute block of time that was set, the value add for that is 0. And I'll tell you, we've spent $75 in the staff time that's sitting in the courtroom in that 15 or 30 minutes. Between the court reporter, the judge, prosecutor, defense attorney, and the court clerk. I can get you the wages if you want, but we've spent $75 in those 15 minutes. So I think your question is spot on. That's exactly what this continued conversation is supposed to be. It's just not the simple, hey, we need to increase revenue and the state average is $250. Let's do it. I mean, I think Laura can also speak to, we've had that approach. We've identified that in the past when you have individuals going through the justice system. The simple reality of the situation over the last 15 years, defendants have been saddled with fees. The state of Wisconsin has done a masterful job of adding fee after fee after fee after court cost after court cost after court cost. When you end up having a $100 fine plus court cost, Kelly, off the top of your head, do you know what that is? Yeah, $250 plus. I would DNA surcharge. Yeah, so there's just a lot of those fees that are added on to defendants who are already in a position where they can't pay, so it creates this kind of cycle of struggle. And I know Laura has something.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that too, that our priority is to get people the services to change their behavior so they don't come back through the system. So these individuals are also paying out-of-pocket expenses to attend classes, groups, counseling, whatever their plan is as part of their diversion. Specifically, when we look at the operating after revocation, those individuals have got to come up with money to do their traffic safety assessment. They may have hundreds and thousands of dollars in fines to pay off. They have to do their driver safety plan. So there's a whole lot of fees that they incur trying to comply with their plan as well.
Thank you, very helpful. So then page 66 in the packet. I was just curious as far as the religious books that are available with the Quran and the other one listed, are they able to get a Christian Bible too?
So the reason that we charge for those is because we can't get them donated. The Quran and Torah are purchased on behalf of an inmate if we have to do that. And then oftentimes they pay for that.
Okay, interesting. Page 74, the sheriff's shelter home. For as far as levy, I was just curious as to, in 2021, it was at 84% levy, 22 was 87%, and 23 is 100%. And I was curious as to why the increase, and is it projected to stay at 100%?
You're talking the shelter home? So we're no longer operating the shelter home. The reason the percentage went up to 100% in 2023 was just the closeout costs of that program. It's no longer operating.
Okay.
That, just for everyone to kind of close the loop, that was a program that the sheriff's office operated. Social services was in many respects a customer, as were other departments of social services. We transferred a portion of the overall levy savings from the shelter home operations to social services to essentially have them procure those programs and those services in a different way. But it wasn't dollar for dollar. They got, my recollection was about 60% of the total overall cost of shelter home.
Thank you. I think that concludes my questions for today. I appreciate everyone's information and patience.
No, very good. Thank you. Great questions.
Any more questions?
I do have one.
Okay.
Lance, you might know this, I don't know if you do or not. The prenatal home visitation program, how many mothers or babies are they taken care of, overseen?
I can get you that information. So that's through the health department. That was the model change. We moved from the Start Right model of nurse home visiting to the nurse family partnership model. That's that kind of nationally accepted model. And my recollection was that the target was 50 families, but I don't want to say that and not have the opportunity to clarify. So I can get you the memo that Laura Scudari drafted on that program. We actually just had it discussed at the last Health and Human Services meeting, so that would be another place to look. And Laura gave an update as to some of the kind of first families that we're serving through that program. And I can get you the target. But my recollection, it was 50 families as we ramp up the new model. But I'll make sure to get you that, Supervisor.
Sorry, one more question. The K-9 unit, we're raising money for a new addition, correct? I was curious if we know how much we need yet.
I don't know what we need. We do fundraising annually, and all of that money gets directed back to the Community Foundation. In addition to that money that we fundraise, there's another fund at the Community Foundation called the Bradfish Fund, and that was an endowment. I need to get the right word. Thanks, Bill. An endowment that was given to all Marathon County K-9 units. It's actually overseen by the Sheriff's Office, but we work with the police departments that meet the criteria within that endowment to actually receive the funds. So there are things like you have to get a dog from a certified reputable kennel. That's one of the criteria. So Wausau's all in, we're all in, Everest Metro is all in, Spencer PD is working to get into that program. So when it comes to running our K-9 program, we're either using endowment funds or we're using the fundraising efforts that we have in order to bring dogs into the agency. And where we're at right now, our handler is down getting a dog right now, so I think we're good. And we just keep, as we fundraise, we put money in, and then oftentimes there are veterinary services that they just do for our dogs as a donation. So,
Any more questions? You sure? Okay. All right, then we will move on to number, where are we here? 6. Operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. 6A, resolution related to staffing agreement for the operation of the Marathon County Jail. Is this yours, Chad?
it is. So Sandra brought this to me a couple of weeks ago. There are a number of documents, if you will, or laws that guide how we run our operation in the jail. One of them is DOC 350. If you go look for this, you have to specifically look for DOC 350. If you look at state statute 350, you'll learn a lot about snowmobiles. So be careful when you're looking for this, that you're looking for the right document. DOC 350 requires that the sheriff's office have an agreement with the county board as it pertains to the staffing within our jail. So as I put this together, I used the exact same document that we used in 2014 when the board entered into an agreement with Sheriff Parks. So this will now be an agreement between me and the board and how we staff. The only thing we had to change within this document were some of the titles. As you know, with the class comp study that we just went through, some of the titles of positions have changed. And from the time that Sheriff Parks signed the agreement in 2014, we actually upgraded 6 positions from corrections officer to corporal. And that was 2015. So it's been a number of years since that happened. What you see in this agreement is exactly how we've been operating the jail for the last 10 years or so, 8 or 9 years. So there are no surprises. There's nothing in here that's any different from, in essence, what it was in 2014. What this will require then is for the committee to move it forward, move a resolution forward to the board to approve it.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to move it forward.
Is there a second? Jason, second. Any questions or more? We okay? All right. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And it's passed. Okay, number 8, next meeting date and time announcements and future agenda items. A, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. Next meeting is Tuesday, July 11th at 1:30. Any announcements?
I don't have an announcement, but I have an idea. So last Thursday, I believe, there was a meeting, the grassroots legalization for marijuana by Senator Mary Agard, that she did a presentation at the library. I'm wondering if it is worth discussing, since we had just gone through this whole thing, 18 months ago, when they tried to change the ordinance, or when one of the supervisors tried to change the ordinance for marijuana. According to this senator, she feels our justice system is ready, and I'm not sure if I agree with that. And so it's just an idea if it would be worth a conversation or not. That's one idea. And the other one was, based on our conversation today, if it would behoove us to discuss the diversion fee cost benefit, if it's something maybe we want to look at maybe getting rid of, as Ruth suggested.
Do you want to put that on for the next agenda items? Okay, any more announcements? I have one. I'm going to do a little chest pounding. So Man of Honor, if you're not familiar with Man of Honor, is a 501(c) nonprofit organization that consists of 500 plus members, the majority of who are veterans who've served to protect our country. My husband's a Vietnam Air Force vet, and I'm an associate member. And we deal with the same veterans that our county veteran services deal with. We raise money to help military veterans just in Marathon County. And our biggest fundraiser is this weekend, Friday through Sunday, at Eagles Club on South 3rd Avenue. If any of you have some free time, please stop in, buy a hamburger or beer, or go and do a 50-50 raffle, or bid on a basket, whatever. There's a band on Friday night and Saturday night. On Saturday at dusk, after the lowering of the flag and a short ceremony, we'll have fireworks. Please God, no rain. And Sunday, there's chicken dinner and a Polish polka band, which you won't find me there on Sunday. I hate polka music. But if you know a veteran who is in need of financial assistance for anything, for rent, utilities, car payment, medical stuff, please have them contact Man of Honor. That's why we're raising money, to help people, to give them a hand up. And the money goes right to the vendor, doesn't go to the person, so you know the bills are being paid. But please, if you know anyone. So any participation during the event to help our veterans who serve is really helping to preserve our freedom too, because these people gave it. Some of them gave all, some of them gave a little, but everybody gave something. So I would appreciate support. And please, if you know anyone, contact Man of Honor so they can get help. Thank you. Okay. Oh, Lance.
If I can, if anyone has been following the Joint Committee on Finance very closely, as I know all of you have, through the budget process, the little bit of update, we can give you more at the next, your next monthly meeting. But within the omnibus motion, there was inclusion of $7 million for the Regional Forensic Science Center on the condition that Marathon County and other local partners come up with the remaining $7.8 million. So great news on the state side that they came forward with that that amount of funding, and we are continuing to meet as staff and with the more task force to talk about kind of what those fundraising capital campaign steps look like. But just wanted to give you all that update, and we'll have more information at your next meeting.
That is so great. Okay, number 9. Move to adjourn. Second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carried. Thank you, everyone, for attending.